The abyss watches. The car glided along the deserted road, surrounded by towering trees that closed in like a cathedral of shadows. The sky was grey, covered with heavy clouds that threatened to collapse at any moment. Lucas adjusted the rearview mirror and looked at his friends in the back seat. "Last chance to back out, guys." Alice, sitting beside him, laughed. "Come on, Lucas. You sound like the narrator of a bad horror movie." "I'm just saying, this place is in the middle of nowhere. No signal, no neighbors, no help if someone breaks a leg." "That's what makes it fun," Raphael said, leaning against the window, watching the scenery. "Fun is a strong word," murmured Sophia, adjusting her glasses. "Quit the drama," Matthias interrupted from the driver's seat. "My uncle's cabin is perfect. We can drink, tell stories, forget the outside world. And besides, the lake is beautiful, and there's a huge fireplace." Alice grinned. "See? That's called an experience. You should relax, Lucas." Lucas sighed and looked back out the window. Something about the atmosphere bothered him. The road felt wrong. The trees were too tall, their twisted branches reaching out like hands trying to grab the car. The wind made no sound, and the sky was too still. Not a single bird in sight. An uneasy feeling crept into his chest. The silence was broken by Sophia. "Have you ever heard the legend about this place?" Raphael laughed. "Here we go. I'm serious. My grandfather used to say this valley was forbidden. No one used to live here. People avoided it. There's a story about an entity that inhabits the lake." Lucas felt a chill. "What kind of entity?" Sophia hesitated. He never explained it properly. He just said there are places people shouldn't go, that something would awaken if we stayed too long. A heavy silence settled over the car. Matthias scoffed. "That's just old folklore. We're almost there. You guys should forget about this nonsense." Alice rolled her eyes. "Exactly. Enough of the creepy talk. We came here to have fun." Lucas forced a smile. But deep inside, something told him they were about to enter a place that did not belong to this world, and that something was watching them. The car shook as it left the paved road, turning onto a narrow dirt path surrounded by ancient trees. The engine rumbled softly, and every loose stone made the vehicle rattle. Lucas stared out the window, feeling the weight of the forest around them. Something was wrong. The trees seemed more twisted, their trunks intertwining like a living organism, gripping each other. And then, suddenly, they stopped. Out of nowhere, the forest opened up into a clearing, and in the center, perched at the edge of a dark lake, stood the house. The cabin was large, built from aged wooden planks that were darkened with time and covered in patches of moss. The windows were tall and black, reflecting the overcast sky. A porch extended toward the lake, with worn-out steps leading down to the still water. Sophia was the first to break the silence. "Okay, this looks like something straight out of a horror story," Raphael grinned. "Exactly, and that's what makes it even better. Look at this place. It's like a movie set." Matthias parked the car and stepped out, stretching his arms. "Welcome to paradise, people." Lucas stayed inside for a moment longer. His eyes were drawn to the lake. It didn't move. No ripples, no wind disturbing the surface, no signs of life. It was a black hole of water, like a giant eye watching everything. Then for a second, he saw something move beneath it. A shadow. Large. Slow. Deep. He blinked and the thing was gone. "Lucas!" Alice called, knocking on the window. "Snap out of it, let's explore the house." He hesitated for a moment, then unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car. But he couldn't shake the feeling that, down there in the lake, something was waiting for them. Mateus turned the key in the lock and pushed the cabin door open. The hinges creaked as if they hadn't been used in years. A strong scent of old wood and dampness filled the air. The interior was spacious but stuffy, as if the air had been trapped inside for too long. The wooden floor creaked under their feet as they entered. The main room was decorated with rustic furniture, a worn leather couch, a massive stone fireplace, and a thick rug in the center. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty books and strange objects. A staircase led to the upper floor, where the bedrooms were located. Toward the back of the cabin, a sliding glass door opened to the porch overlooking the lake. Lucas ran his fingers along the stair railing. It was cold, too cold for a place that had been locked up all this time. A shiver crawled down his spine. "All right, I take back what I said," Raphael said, tossing his backpack onto the couch. "This place is awesome. It looks like a horror movie set," Alice joked. "A group of friends spends the weekend in an isolated cabin. What could possibly go wrong?" Sophia removed her glasses and wiped the lenses on her shirt. "Funny you say that. I felt weird ever since we got here." "Oh, great. Here comes the skeptical scientist getting scared of folklore," Mateus teased. "It's not fear, it's intuition." Sophia crossed her arms. "Haven't you guys felt it? Something off?" The group exchanged uneasy glances. Lucas hesitated. He had felt it. Since the road, since the lake. But he didn't want to be the first to say it. "It's just because the place is old and quiet," Mateus said, trying to lighten the mood. "I'll open the windows, let in some fresh air." He walked to the sliding glass door and pulled it open. A cold breeze rushed inside, making Alice's hair stand on end. She stepped out onto the porch and stared at the lake. "The water is weird," she murmured. "No waves, no fish jumping." Mateus leaned against the railing and looked out at the water. "My uncle always said no one fishes here. The lake is too deep." "Too deep," Sophia frowned. Mateus shrugged. "They say the water is thick, that things sink and never come back up." "How reassuring," Lucas muttered, feeling another chill. Alice clapped her hands together. "Okay, enough creepy talk. Let's pick our rooms." They climbed the stairs, which groaned under their weight. The upstairs hallway was narrow, with 3 wooden doors. Dim sunlight filtered in through the side windows, but it wasn't enough. The rooms were simple but cozy. Large beds, old wardrobes, and windows facing the forest. "This one's mine," Mateus declared, throwing his bag into the first room. "I'll take the middle one," Alice said. Lucas and Raphael took the last one. Sophia hesitated. "Are you sure there's no extra room?" Mateus pointed to the end of the hallway. "There's one more door, but I think it's a storage closet. I've never been inside." Sophia walked over and turned the handle. "Locked." "Locked?" she murmured. She crouched down and peered through the keyhole. Nothing. Only absolute darkness. She quickly stepped away. "Okay, that creeped me out." Mateus laughed. "You're all way too tense. It'll pass once we start drinking." Alice grinned. "Finally, a good idea from you, Mateus." They spent the next hour settling in, unpacking, and getting comfortable. But Lucas still felt like something was wrong, and he had no idea why. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the cabin was swallowed by an eerie blue-gray twilight. The group had lit the fireplace, spread blankets on the floor, and placed a few beers in the cooler. The oppressive feeling of the place seemed to ease a little with the lights on and the sound of laughter filling the room. Lucas was in the kitchen grabbing some glasses when he felt something behind him. He turned quickly. Nothing. The kitchen was empty, But something felt wrong. The sliding glass door to the porch, the one leading to the lake, was open. He frowned. He didn't remember anyone opening it after Mateus. Lucas approached slowly, the cold night air brushing against his skin. Outside, the lake remained motionless, like an ink-black stain on the earth. Then he saw it, wet footprints. They led from the lake, but there were no footprints going back. A chill ran down his spine. "Lucas, where are the glasses?" Alice called from the living room. He turned, startled, his heart pounding. "I'm coming!" When he looked back at the porch, the footprints were gone. The group sat on the rug in front of the fireplace, beer cans opened, a deck of cards scattered across the floor. Raphael cracked his knuckles. "All right, time to do what every group in an isolated cabin does. Tell horror stories." "Great. Let's scare ourselves before sleeping in a house in the middle of nowhere," Sophia muttered. Alice laughed and took a sip of beer. "If we're doing this, at least make it a real scary story. No stupid urban legends about killers in the woods." Mateus pointed at Sophia. "You mentioned a legend about this place earlier. Why not tell us now?" Sophia's expression darkened. She looked at the beer in her hand, as if searching for courage. "My grandfather used to say this region was wrong. People refused to build here. The elders believed the lake wasn't really a lake, but a rift, a doorway to something that had always been here." Lucas felt his stomach tighten. "A doorway to what?" Sophia sighed. "He never explained it clearly. He just said that sometimes people who came here didn't return. Some of them heard whispers at night. Others saw things in the water, things that shouldn't exist." Silence hung heavy in the room. "Okay, that was good," Raphael said, forcing a laugh. "But it's just folklore, right? If it were real, we would have seen something weird already." Lucas wanted to tell them about the footprints on the porch, but he didn't. Mateus smirked. "Since we're on this topic, let's play a game." Alice raised an eyebrow. "What kind of game?" Mateus grabbed a glass and filled it with beer. "We take turns asking the lake a question. If it answers, well, then I guess the legend is real." Lucas felt a knot in his stomach. "That is a terrible idea." "Relax, man. It's just for fun," Mateus said, getting up. "Come on, let's go to the porch and see if the lake responds." The group exchanged glances. One by one, they stood. Lucas hesitated, but followed. The porch was cold. The wind whispered through the trees. The group approached the railing, looking down at the black water below. Mateus lifted the glass. "Oh, great entity of the lake, we are here to ask you a question." He laughed, glancing at the others. "If you really exist, give us a sign." Silence. The water remained still, no movement, nothing. "See? Nothing. Now can we?" Splash. Something fell into the water. Everyone froze. Lucas felt his heart skip a beat. "What was that?" Sophia whispered. They looked around. None of them had thrown anything. The lake remained eerily still. But then something rose to the surface. Not a fish, not a branch. Something white. A hand. A human hand. Pale and skeletal, emerging from the water as if trying to crawl out. Alice screamed. Lucas grabbed Raphael and yanked him back. The hand lingered for a moment, then sank back down, disappearing beneath the surface. The silence was deafening. Mateus took a step back. That was... Before he could finish, the cabin door slammed shut behind them. And the wind whispered something. Something indecipherable. Something ancient. Lucas knew that wasn't the wind. Someone or something had heard them, and now it was coming. The silence after the door slammed shut was absolute. The five of them stood frozen on the porch, their faces pale, their breathing uneven. The only sound was the echo of what they had just seen in the lake. A human hand, reaching out as if trying to emerge. But there had been no one there. "That was the wind, right?" Raphael asked, forcing a nervous laugh. "The wind doesn't have hands," Sophia muttered. Lucas stepped toward the door and tried to open it. Locked. He jiggled the handle. Nothing. What the hell? Why won't it open? Matthias joined him and banged on the door. "Is someone in there?" Nothing. The cabin was dark inside, as if the light had been sucked out. Alice was breathing too fast. "This doesn't make sense." We left the door open. Lucas felt a chill crawl down his spine. Yes, and they left the door open, but now it was locked, and someone had locked it from the inside. Matthias struggled with the handle again, but Raphael had a more practical idea. "Screw this, I'm going around back." The kitchen window was open. He climbed down the porch steps and disappeared around the side of the cabin. The others stayed still, exchanging uneasy glances. Time felt stretched. The air had become thicker. "This isn't right," Sophia whispered, hugging herself. Lucas turned to the lake. The surface was still motionless, but now it looked even darker, even denser, as if something deep within was waiting. Plack! A sound inside the cabin. They all turned toward the door. "What was that?" Alice whispered. Lucas pressed his face against the glass, trying to see inside, but the darkness was absolute. Another sound, this time louder. Plack! Like something moving inside. "Raphael, hurry up!" Matthias shouted, pounding on the door. Then they heard it. Footsteps inside the cabin. But Raphael hadn't entered yet. Lucas felt his heart pound against his ribs. Alice took a shaky step back. The footsteps continued, heavy and dragging, moving from the far end of the house toward the door. And then they stopped, right behind the door. Matthias stepped back. The silence was suffocating. And then, knock, knock, knock. Something knocked from the other side. Alice let out a muffled scream. Sophia covered her mouth. Lucas couldn't move. The thing on the other side knew they were there, and it was waiting. The silence was shattered by the sound of glass breaking. "I got in!" Raphael's voice echoed from inside. The footsteps started again. Fast now, running, straight toward Raphael. "Raphael, get out of there!" Lucas yelled. Screams. The sound of something scraping, furniture falling over, and then silence. Matthias slammed into the door with his shoulder. This time it burst open. They ran inside. The living room was dark, lit only by the weak glow of the fireplace. The rug was out of place. The chairs were overturned. The glass Matthias had used in the game was shattered on the floor. But Raphael was gone. "Raphael," Alice called, her voice shaking. "Nothing." "This isn't right, man," Matthias whispered. Lucas turned toward the kitchen. The window was broken. Raphael had climbed through, but now he wasn't anywhere. Sophia pointed at the floor. Footprints, wet, leading from outside into the house. Alice was trembling. Those aren't Raphael's footprints, because the footprints weren't human. They were larger, longer, twisted, like something had crawled inside. Lucas swallowed hard. "There's something in here with us." Then Raphael's voice echoed from upstairs. "Hey guys." The four of them froze. Slowly, they turned their heads toward the staircase. The voice was coming from one of the bedrooms, but something was wrong with it. It sounded distant, like someone trying to remember how to speak. Is someone there? Alice took a step back. That doesn't sound like Raphael. The staircase creaked. Something was coming down, but the steps weren't normal. They were erratic, like something wasn't moving properly. Mateus swallowed hard. Raphael, the voice from upstairs repeated. Is someone there? But this time, it was wrong. It was distorted, like a scratched record, skipping. And then, they saw it. Something began to descend the stairs. Raphael, but it wasn't him. His body was pale, his eyes empty, his neck was twisted at an unnatural angle. His mouth was too wide open, like it didn't know how to close. And then he smiled, wide, too wide. Impossible. Alice screamed. Lucas grabbed her arm and pulled her back. Sophia was sobbing. The thing that wasn't Raphael reached the last step and stood still, staring at them. Then it slowly tilted its head, its neck cracking like broken twigs. And in that wrong, delayed voice, it asked, Is someone there? The Raphael that wasn't Raphael stood at the bottom of the stairs, grinning that impossible grin. His eyes were black, empty. His twisted neck hung at an angle that no living person could maintain. Alice was barely holding back a scream. Sophia covered her mouth with trembling hands. Lucas could feel his heartbeat pounding in his skull. Mateus was the only one who dared to speak. Raphael. Man, what the fuck is this? The thing tilted its head. A dry, snapping noise came from its neck, and then it repeated itself. Is someone there? But the voice wasn't normal. It came out wrong, as if it was being played on a broken recorder. The words were too slow, too offbeat. That's not him. That's not him. Alice whispered, shaking. Lucas swallowed hard. Where's the real Raphael? The thing's grin disappeared. For a second, its face was completely neutral, blank, empty. Then its head started tilting backward. More, until it was completely upside down, making a sickening, wet, cracking sound. Sophia gasped in horror. And then the thing moved. It didn't walk. It threw itself forward like a puppet with cut strings, its arms bent at the wrong angles, its legs folding in an impossible way. And then it ran at them. Alice screamed. Mateus pulled Sophia back. Lucas felt a wave of pure terror crash through his body. But the thing wasn't running normally. Its feet barely touched the ground. Its body twitched erratically, like it was trying to remember how to move. Lucas acted without thinking. He grabbed one of the chairs from the living room and lifted it into the air. The thing lunged forward. Crash! The chair smashed into its face. Its head snapped sideways, but it didn't stop turning. It kept spinning like its neck was made of rubber until it was back in its original position. Lucas froze. Alice grabbed his arm. Run! They sprinted toward the door. Mateus yanked the handle, locked. No, 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 no! He shouted. The thing kept moving toward them. Lucas looked around desperately. What to do? What to do? Then the thing stopped, right in the middle of the room. Its head turned slowly toward the fireplace, and then it spoke again. But this time, it wasn't Raphael's voice. It was deep, layered, ancient, and it came from everywhere at once. The fire. The fire is the key. Lucas felt his brain twist. Alice collapsed to her knees, pressing her hands over her ears. Sophia was sobbing, rocking back and forth. Mateus squeezed his eyes shut like he was trying to block something out. The thing took a step back. Its black, empty eyes locked onto the fireplace. Lucas looked at the flames, and then he understood. He ran forward, grabbed a burning log, and threw it at the thing. The fire touched its skin, and reality split open. A screeching, inhuman sound echoed through the cabin. The walls shook, the windows shattered, the thing's entire body burst into flames. But it wasn't normal fire. The flames were black. They crawled against gravity, twisting into clawed hands that reached for the ceiling. The thing's body folded in on itself as if it was being sucked into a singularity. And then it was gone. The flames vanished as if they had never been there. The cabin was silent again. Lucas collapsed onto his knees, gasping for breath. Alice was sobbing. Sophia was trembling violently. Mateus just stood there, staring at the floor, completely still. And then they heard it. Whispers coming from inside the walls. Lucas felt a cold dread sink into his bones. They weren't alone. The cabin was changing. The world around them was changing, and there was no way out. The silence after Raphael disappeared was overwhelming. Lucas was still on his knees, his body trembling, his lungs burning. The scent of charred flesh and black smoke lingered in the air. Alice was sobbing softly, her face buried in her hands. Sophia stared blankly at the fireplace, her mouth slightly open as if she were trapped in a trance. Mateus wasn't moving at all. And then, knock, knock, knock. The whispers returned, but not from one place. They came from everywhere. Lucas looked around. And then he saw something that shouldn't have been possible. The shadows in the cabin were wrong. They moved on their own, shifting along the walls like they were alive. Some were too tall, others too twisted, some didn't even look human. And the worst part, the shadows didn't match their bodies. Lucas looked at Alice's shadow on the floor. It was trembling, but Alice wasn't moving. His stomach twisted into a knot. This isn't real. Then the cabin door swung open and the wind rushed in. But there was no wind outside. Beyond the door, there was something wrong. The porch was still there. But beyond it, there was nothing. No sky, no trees, no stars, just a deep, infinite void, waiting. Mateus finally moved. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. He backed up against the wall, his hands shaking. Sophia started whispering again. Lucas moved toward her. Sophia? She didn't respond. Her lips were moving quickly, murmuring something over and over. But then Lucas listened. The abyss watches. The abyss watches. The abyss watches. Sophia! He grabbed her shoulders and shook her. She collapsed instantly. Alice sobbed louder. Mateus clenched his fists. We need to get out of here, now! Lucas looked at the open door. The darkness beyond was too thick. And then, something moved inside it. A shadow larger than anything human. Slow, patient, watching. Lucas felt his throat tighten. There's something outside. Alice started shaking. Mateus closed his eyes tightly. Sophia, now conscious again, whispered something almost inaudible. If we leave, we never come back. Lucas felt an icy fear grip his heart. What do you mean? Sophia turned to him. Her eyes were empty. My grandfather. He used to talk about this. She pointed to the nothingness outside. There are places where reality is fragile, where time doesn't work right, where... She swallowed hard. Where the old things still live. Lucas felt a deep, sickening dread. Mateus took a step toward the door. We can't stay here. Alice looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Go where?" Silence fell over the group. And then they heard it. Something tapped the window. Alice screamed. Matthias grabbed a chair and slammed it against the door, locking it again. Lucas turned toward the window. The glass was fogged up, as if someone had breathed on it from the outside. And then a single finger dragged across the glass, drawing something. A curve, another, until it formed an eye. A black eye, staring at them from the mist. Sophia gasped. Lucas felt his breath catch in his throat. Alice shook her head violently. "No, no, no, no," Matthias whispered. "What does that mean?" Lucas swallowed hard. He already knew. The lake, whatever was inside it, was looking at them. And now it was coming. The window was fogged, and the eye drawn on the glass stared back at them. Lucas felt his stomach twist. Alice gripped his arm tightly. Matthias and Sophia stood frozen, their faces pale, their eyes locked on the window. And then the fireplace flickered. For a single moment the light vanished, and when it returned, the eye on the glass was gone. Lucas stepped back, pulling Alice with him. Something is inside. Matthias stumbled away from the window, his skin ghostly white. Sophia pressed her arms tightly around herself. The cabin isn't the same anymore. Lucas looked around. She was right. The walls seemed taller. The ceiling stretched higher. The room felt wrong, bigger than before. And the air wasn't real. Like they were standing in a place that was only pretending to be a cabin. Then Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She pointed at the far wall. That door. Lucas turned. A door had appeared at the end of the hallway. It hadn't been there before. They all knew it. Matthias's voice trembled. "That door wasn't there." Alice whimpered. What the hell is happening? The air around them shivered. The walls stretched. The whispers grew louder. And then a sound. A footstep. From the upstairs hallway. Slow. Dragging. Lucas turned toward the stairs. Something was coming down. Something that wasn't them. And then the door to one of the bedrooms creaked open. A long, dark hand gripped the doorframe. Fingers too long, a shadowed figure began to step out. Lucas's vision blurred, his heartbeat pounded in his ears. And then Alice screamed. The door at the end of the hallway flew open. A wind rushed through the cabin. The lights flickered violently, and a voice, deep, ancient, inhuman, spoke from inside the walls. "You should not be here." And then everything went dark. Lucas opened his eyes. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. The darkness had swallowed everything. But now, there was light. A cold, bluish light that didn't come from any lamp or fire. He was lying on a strange floor. It looked like wood. But when he touched it, it felt too smooth. Like glass. Or ice. Slowly, he pushed himself up, his body feeling heavy, sluggish, as if he was trapped in a dream. And then he looked around. His heart stopped. He wasn't in the cabin anymore. Alice, Matthias, and Sophia were near him, still unconscious. But the place was wrong. The room had the same shape as the cabin, the same size, the same arrangement of doors and windows. But there was nothing outside. The door was open. The porch was still there. But beyond it, there was only infinite emptiness. No sky, no ground, just a vast, endless blackness stretching forever. Alice stirred. What? She opened her eyes and froze when she saw where they were. Lucas, what is this? What's happening? He didn't know how to answer. Matthias woke up with a jolt. Sophia's eyes fluttered open and she began to cry. This isn't real. Matthias stumbled to his feet. We're dreaming. Alice pressed her hands against her head, breathing too fast. This isn't a dream. This is... Lucas looked around. The windows were still there, but when he looked through them, they showed different places. In one window, he saw the road they had driven on. In another, he saw the cabin, but empty. And in another, he saw the lake and something rising from it. He jerked away from the glass. We aren't in the real world anymore, Sophia whispered. We're in the place between worlds. Alice turned to her. What? Sophia was trembling. My grandfather used to talk about this. She pointed toward the void outside. There are places where reality is thin, where time doesn't flow properly. Where, she swallowed, where the old things still exist. Lucas felt his whole body turn cold. Matthias took a shaky step backward. We have to get out of here. Alice looked at the open door. Go where? The silence was suffocating. And then they heard it. From the void outside, something was moving. A slow, dragging sound, like something massive was awakening. Lucas stopped breathing. Alice took a step closer to him, her eyes wide with terror. There's something out there. Matthias clenched his fists. We can't stay here. We need to find a way out. Lucas scanned the room. The windows showed different places. The door showed the void. The floor felt like glass. And then he turned toward the fireplace and froze, because inside the fireplace, among the ashes, there was an eye, wide open, staring directly at him. And then it blinked, and something spoke. You should not have come here. The eye inside the fireplace blinked. Lucas froze. Alice gripped his arm tightly. Matthias and Sophia took a step back, staring at the burning eye inside the ashes. And then the voice returned, low, cold, definitive. You must leave, now, before he arrives. Lucas felt his stomach drop. Alice whispered, before who arrives? The voice softened, like a whisper dying out. The one who watches. Matthias pressed his hands against his head. No, 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 I don't want to hear any more of this. We need to leave. Lucas looked around. There are 3 ways out. He pointed at the 3 options in front of them. The open door leading into the endless void, the windows each showing a different place, the fireplace where the eye still watched them. Sophia hugged herself. The door isn't an option. If we step through it, we fall into nothing. Matthias glanced at the windows. And these. Lucas took a deep breath. Each one shows a different place. But which one is real? Alice hesitated, stepping closer to the fireplace. The eye followed her. And the fire? The eye closed. The flames vanished. And the voice, now coming from deep inside the chimney, whispered, if you choose this path, he will see you. Lucas felt an icy dread fill his chest. The door would lead them to the void. The windows would take them to unknown places. The fireplace would take them straight to him. Alice looked at Lucas, waiting for an answer. Matthias stared at the door. Sophia, trembling, stared at the glass-like floor. And then Something knocked on the other side of the door. Knock, knock, knock. Alice gasped. Matthäus slammed himself against the wall, covering his ears. Lucas didn't turn around, because he already knew. He had arrived. The Watcher. The entity that existed between worlds. The true owner of this place, and he was waiting. They had to choose now. Lucas closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made a choice. Lucas opened his eyes. A faint, continuous sound filled the air, like the wind, but slower. The cabin was gone. Alice, Matthäus, Sophia, gone. He was alone, or at least, he thought he was. The ground beneath him was black and slick, like he was standing on a surface that should have swallowed him. The air was heavy. Something unseen pressed against his chest. He was being watched. And then, a whisper came from the darkness. Low, familiar. Lucas. His blood ran cold. The voice was Alice's. He spun around, eyes wide. Alice was there, but she wasn't right. She stood far away, her body partially submerged in the black floor, slowly sinking. Her eyes were lifeless. Her skin was too pale, and she was smiling. Lucas, you found me. Her voice was wrong. It sounded like Alice, but something was behind it. Something false. Lucas hesitated, stepping forward. Alice, is that you? She tilted her head, and then another voice spoke from the dark. Don't go near her. Lucas turned. Matthäus, or something that looked like Matthäus. He stood behind him, his face partially hidden in shadow. And then Sophia appeared. Lucas. She was beside Alice now. Her body was sinking too. Both of them were smiling. Why did you leave us? Lucas felt his pulse skyrocket. I didn't leave anyone. Matthäus stepped closer. This isn't real. Alice and Sophia tilted their heads at the same time. Their smiles widened, and then they spoke together. What is real, Lucas? The sound of their voices made the air distort. Lucas stumbled back. Matthäus grabbed his arm. Run! Lucas hesitated. But they're not real. Lucas looked at Alice and Sophia. Their bodies began to shake. Their skin cracked like thin paper, and something black began to emerge from inside them. Something faceless. Something trying to wear them like a mask. Lucas ran. Matthäus followed. The sound of bones cracking echoed behind them as the things that looked like Alice and Sophia broke apart, revealing twisting, blackened figures. And then the ground disappeared. They fell. And when Lucas opened his eyes again, he was back in the cabin. But now, something was waiting for him in the fireplace, and the fire burned black. The fire in the fireplace burned black. Lucas felt the cold heat of those impossible flames against his skin. Matthäus stood beside him, breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on the fire. Alice and Sophia were not there. Or maybe they never had been. Lucas felt his mind fracturing. What was real? The cabin, the void, the road they had traveled, the thing that pretended to be Alice. Or was none of it real? And then a voice spoke from the fire, low, deep, timeless. You have come to me. Matthäus stepped back, his skin pale as death. This isn't possible. Lucas couldn't speak. The voice wasn't just in the fire. It was inside his skull. It wasn't coming from the flames. It was coming from everywhere. It was coming from inside him. You have crossed into the other side. Now you belong to it. Lucas finally forced words out. The other side of what? The flames trembled, and then it emerged. From the black fire, something began to rise. First fingers, long, thin, twisted, then a hand, then arms impossibly stretched, and then a face without features, a void of blackness where a face should have been. But Lucas knew it was looking at him, knew it understood him. I am the one who watches. The voice bent the walls of the cabin. Mathias fell to his knees, clutching his head. This isn't real, this isn't real. Lucas could not move. He was here, the true master of the abyss, the entity that existed before time itself. And now, he wanted something in return. The fire grew. The cabin began to distort, and the voice filled every molecule of air. One of you may leave, but only one. Lucas felt his heart stop. Mathias turned to him, his eyes wild with terror. And then, silence fell over the cabin. Now, they had to choose. The black fire crackled, stretching shadows too tall, too twisted. The thing in the flames loomed over them, its long fingers motionless, waiting. The voice echoed through the walls. Only one may leave. Mathias swallowed hard. This is a joke, right? The thing tilted its head as if it was studying his reaction. Choose, or I will choose for you. Lucas felt pure horror crawl up his spine. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real, or the closest thing to reality that was left. Mathias started shaking his head. No, this isn't right. There has to be another way. The fire flickered. The thing took a step forward, and then something happened. The space around them twisted. The cabin was no longer a cabin. They were now in an endless void, stretching infinitely. No ceiling, said no floor, only the fire, only him. Mathias clutched his head. Lucas, we need to think. Lucas took a deep breath. He had already decided. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, Mathias ran. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He threw himself into the fire, and then the world shattered. Light. Real light. Lucas blinked. The smell of fire was gone. The weight in his chest had vanished. The air was no longer oppressive, and he realized he was back. The cabin was normal again. The floor was wooden. The fireplace was dark and cold. The lake was outside, its surface still and quiet. It was as if nothing had ever happened. But Mathias wasn't there. Lucas felt a sharp pain in his chest. What had he done? And then, a whisper came from the fireplace. Low, weak, almost desperate. Lucas. Lucas felt his blood freeze. He knew that voice. It was Mathias, but it was coming from inside the fireplace. Lucas dropped to his knees, staring at the empty ashes. Mathias, the whisper came again, even weaker, even farther away. Lucas, get me out of here. Lucas felt tears burn his eyes, because he knew there was nothing left to save. The price had already been paid, and the abyss never gives back what belongs to it. Lucas was still on his knees in front of the cold, dead fireplace. The echo of Mathias's voice still rang in his mind. Lucas, get me out of here. He squeezed his eyes shut, pressing his fists against his temples, but nothing changed. The cabin was normal again. The lake outside was still. The door was open. The car was parked exactly where they had left it. As if nothing had ever happened, but something was wrong. Lucas felt it. His eyes scanned the room. The table was still set. The backpacks were still there, but the other 3 chairs were empty. Alice, Sophia, Mateus. They had never left. He turned toward the open door, and then he walked outside. The road back. The car started on the first try. Lucas drove fast, his hands tight around the steering wheel. The trees flew past, their branches twisted and reaching, but he didn't look back. He didn't stop. Hours passed. The road finally led back to the city. Lights, people, houses. Lucas felt tears burn his eyes. He was back. He was alive. But something was wrong. The weight in his chest didn't fade. The world around him felt distorted like a broken reflection. And then he looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but it shouldn't have been, because there should have been Mateus. And for the first time, Lucas wondered if he had really returned, or if he was still there, trapped, lost. And if the abyss had only let him believe he had escaped. And then, in the silence of the car, something happened. Something whispered behind him. A voice, low, barely audible, but impossible to ignore. Is someone there? Lucas slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched. His heart stopped. He turned toward the mirror, and in the reflection, someone was sitting in the back seat, and they were smiling. Lucas didn't move. The car sat in the middle of the road, the engine still humming. The city lights flickered in the distance, just out of reach. And in the rearview mirror, he was still there. The thing in the back seat. It looked just like Lucas. Same face, same hair, same eyes. But the smile was wrong. Too wide, too forced, too unnatural. Lucas felt his breath hitch. This isn't happening. His foot pressed on the gas. The car lurched forward, speeding toward the city. But in the mirror, he was still there, staring, smiling. And then, the thing spoke. Its voice was slow, dragging, like an echo of Lucas's own. You think you came back alone? Lucas felt a wave of nausea. His hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't answer. He didn't want to hear it. But the thing continued. Do you think it was really you who left? Or was it me? Lucas trembled. This isn't real. This isn't real. And then, the car radio turned on by itself. Static. A voice buried inside the noise. At first, it was impossible to understand. But then, Lucas heard it. Mateus. His voice. Weak. Distant. Trapped. Lucas, you can still get me out. Lucas's vision blurred. And in the mirror, the other, Lucas laughed. Softly. Calmly. And then, he whispered before vanishing. Is someone there? Lucas screamed, and the car disappeared into the darkness. Lucas kept driving faster, faster. The city lights came closer, but something was wrong. The streets looked different. The buildings were twisted, slightly distorted. The street lights flickered too much. And the air felt heavy, like the world itself was rejecting him. The car screeched to a stop in front of his house. Lucas jumped out, slamming the door behind him. The street was empty. Too empty. No cars. No wind. No sound. It felt fake. His breathing was uneven as he rushed inside. Inside the house, everything was exactly as he had left it, and the lights were on. The smell of the coffee he made before the trip still lingered in the air. He looked at the clock. The time didn't make sense. His hands began to shake. He grabbed his phone. He needed to call someone. Anyone. Alice. Dialing. Dialing. The number does not exist. His pulse spiked. He tried Sophia. Nothing. And he tried Mateus. The call connected, but no one spoke. Just static. And then a breath. Slow. Low. Wrong. And then a voice. "You're not supposed to be here." Lucas dropped the phone. His heartbeat roared in his ears. He stumbled to the bathroom, needing to see his reflection, needing to make sure he was real. He looked in the mirror. His face, his body, everything was there. But then, the reflection moved a second too late. Lucas stopped breathing. His reflection smiled and whispered, "Are you sure you came back?" Then the mirror shattered. The mirror shattered. Lucas stumbled back, his breath uneven. The fragments of glass reflected pieces of his face, but they didn't move at the same time. Some were smiling, some were blinking when he wasn't. And in the largest shard, his reflection was still there, watching him. And then, it moved on its own. Lucas froze. The reflection tilted its head and smiled, too wide, too wrong. Then the voice came, but it wasn't from the reflection. It came from the walls, from under the floor, from inside his own skull. "You never left." Lucas turned and ran. The place between worlds. The wooden floor disappeared. The walls vanished. Lucas was back in the void, back in the abyss. And then he appeared, the one who watches. The entity rose from the darkness, its long bony arms stretched outward, its fingers too thin, too sharp, and where its face should have been, only emptiness. Lucas couldn't breathe. He felt it inside his mind, inside everything. And then the thing spoke. "You do not belong there." Lucas shook his head violently. No, I came back." The entity tilted its head. "Who told you that?" And then from the void around him, someone laughed. Lucas froze. The laugh came from behind him. Low, dragging, familiar. He turned, and he saw Lucas, another Lucas, exactly like him, but not him. The other Lucas smiled, the same smile from the rearview mirror. And then he whispered, "You came back, didn't you?" Lucas's mind snapped. The watcher leaned closer, and then finally said, "If you are here, then who is living your life?" And at that moment, Lucas understood. He never returned. He never escaped. The thing that had been watching him left in his place. And now, it was too late, because the abyss never returns what belongs to it. And Lucas was already forgotten, forever. Lucas stopped fighting. There was no escape. There was no way back. The truth had already been decided. He was never real, or maybe he had been real once. But now, he was nothing, just like the others. And then, he heard them, not the watcher, not the other Lucas, the voices, hundreds of them, all around him, calling, begging, "Help us." Lucas turned, and he saw shadows, human shapes, but not human anymore. Figures with no faces, bodies with no identities. They dragged themselves forward, slow, empty, forgotten, and they whispered, "Get us out. Lucas felt a wave of pure horror. These weren't just lost souls. They were like him, people who had fallen into the abyss and never returned, erased from reality, trapped in a place where time had no meaning. The Watcher raised one long, thin hand, and the shadows lurched forward. They reached for Lucas, their empty faces inches from his own, and then the Watcher spoke one last time. "You never existed," Lucas screamed, and the darkness swallowed him whole. The abyss was silent. The forgotten no longer whispered. The Watcher stood still. And Lucas was no longer Lucas. He didn't remember his name, didn't remember his face, didn't remember what he had lost. But somewhere, deep within the darkness, something whispered. A voice, a story about a man who fell into the abyss, who tried to escape, who tried to fight, but who was forgotten. And now this story would repeat, because the abyss never stops watching, because it is never empty. And then, for the last time, a voice came from the void. Low, cold, empty. Is someone there? The abyss was silent. The whispers had stopped. The forgotten did not move. Time did not exist. And Lucas was no longer Lucas. He didn't remember his name. He didn't remember his face. He didn't remember what he had lost. But somewhere, in the depths of the darkness, something was whispering. A voice, a story about a man who fell into the abyss, who tried to escape, who tried to fight, but who was forgotten. And now this story would repeat, because the abyss never stops watching, because it is never empty. And then, for the last time, a voice came from nowhere, low, cold, empty. Is someone there?